10 seconds.
First off, hello friends. As you can probably see, the set has changed just a little bit. I'm in a chair today. I've actually moved my entire setup from my house to our work office, so you'll probably hear a little bit of a difference in the audio. This room's a little bit more echoey than my room, but hopefully that doesn't make too much of a difference. All of that being said, I'm still working on my larger projects this week. This video is going to be a little bit longer than my other ones, but it still won't be anything compared to the video I'm just about to do. So get ready for that. Hopefully that'll be something you guys enjoy. All of that being said, I've mentioned before my background in competitive gaming. Basically, I used to play Fortnite, I used to stream a lot of it, and I kind of want to go through why I got out of that. I've gone over this in a couple of other videos, but I really wanted to take a deep dive on it and really talk about some of the culture aspects that happen in competitive gaming and gaming in general, and some of the ways that it's not really helpful for mental health or having positive mental health growing up. I don't want to just focus on the negative things though, so I will also throw in some of the things that I do to help me and some of the little tips and tricks on making sure that you're able to maintain positive mental health while being part of this community. So generally speaking, in the gaming environment, although things are definitely changing right now, it's mainly male-centered in the sense that most games are marketed to men, most of them are played by men, and generally speaking, it's a male-dominant kind of culture, at least at this moment. I will put the general statistics up on the screen so you guys can see those. Those will probably be somewhere to my left or right. I mention this because a lot of males aren't taught how to handle their emotions, and when it's a male-dominant society, those emotional problems or emotional tendencies that come out of a lack of emotional training or IQ end up kind of shaping the environment and kind of setting the tone for how things work for the rest of the people in that culture. Some of the common statements you may be used to are like, suck it up, be a man, don't be a crybaby, men don't cry, those kinds of statements. This kind of advice given by authority figures usually, generally speaking, dampens people's understanding of emotion, and instead of helping them develop when they're young, actually limit their growth and how they're able to operate in the world emotionally. It impacts the way that they understand other people, it impacts how they interact socially, and it also impacts some of their worldview building and other kind of important social things. I'll again provide some statistics either on the left or the right or below me, so that way you guys can check those out. At the same time of all of these things, gaming is a more competitive environment. There's a lot of PvP games out there, player versus player, that evoke a lot of anger, hate, egotism, and kind of competitive spirit inside of those. Now, while none of those things are technically related, and a lot of them on their own are not problems at all, combined together in one environment that kind of provokes those things, it can tend to get quite toxic quite quickly. And because it's kind of a shared experience between all players, it can tend to get very, very toxic and negative very quickly. Now, there's plenty of games that aren't like this. There's entire systems devoted to PvE games and other kinds of content, but I'm specifically focusing on this because this is where a lot of the toxicity of the gaming environment comes from. And so with all of this kind of knowledge in the background and the proof that I've shown, for individuals that are just kind of wanting to compete kind of in games, but not really professionally, they're just trying to, get better at whatever game they're playing, they're subjected to this environment. Winning is almost always more fun than losing, so for a lot of people, winning is just about having fun at the game. And to do that, they have to really engage with the game and invest themselves. And so for a lot of people, just invested in games and not the environment, they're going to be subjected to it and it's going to impact them. There are plenty of studies on peer pressure and a lot of other things. I'll mention those here as well, so that way you guys can review those. So let's take a break for a little bit and talk about my personal experience with the gaming community, kind of shift gears and dive into really how I experienced this coming from kind of an outsider's perspective. So growing up, my parents weren't really interested in allowing me to play a lot of video games. They were very conservative and they kind of viewed gaming and a lot of technology as being a negative thing. And even the games that I got to play were usually outdated, old, or not a competitive kind of game. There's a lot of stuff that I had that I was just playing on my own, and so I wasn't really able to engage in the PvP nature of a lot of these things. I remember playing Need for Speed and Super Mario Bros, and I have really fond memories about those things. But for instance, I wasn't playing a lot of Halo, and I wasn't playing a lot of Modern Warfare. And when I would go over to friends' houses, it was only a couple hours that I get to spend with those games once every few months, which means I was never able to actually get really, really good at it like I wanted to. Because I was a little bit removed from this environment, I never really experienced the hate or the aggression or the competitive nature of these games. So to kind of summarize my childhood experiences, I wasn't really ever getting the full experience of a video game, the full PvP nature of it, mainly because of time constraints that my parents would put on me, or time constraints that I had with friends at their houses, and because I didn't really get to involve myself in those environments or those communities, really get good at Modern Warfare or Halo or any of the popular games when I was young. I was a really big noob, and a lot of the people that I was playing with got really tired of playing with me and would try to go do other things. So a couple years passed and gaming really wasn't my focus during those times. I played some Skyrim, I played some other things, but it wasn't really my focus until I started to get into a lot more video production and streaming. One of my friends showed me this game called Fortnite, and at the time it was just starting to blow up, so I was really excited about jumping on it. For quite a few months, I was an absolute noob at the game. I had no idea how to play it, no game sense, no accuracy, none of that. And so even during that time, I wasn't experiencing the really toxic or competitive side of the game because the people I was playing with were usually, generally speaking, around my skill level. And the people that were actually good at the game were so much beyond me that I didn't even consider them part of the game that I was in. I was looking up to them versus thinking that I was on the same level as them. And one day it was crazy. It was like the switch flipped in my brain. I just decided I'm going to be good at this game and I'm going to put my time into it and invest. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't get anywhere near what would be considered a pro level. I didn't get necessarily really good at the game, but I was a lot better than I used to be. And I started playing competitively and actually being able to carry my weight at some points. And because I was streaming during this time, I really had kind of the excuse to spend long hours playing a video game. And so to contrast where I was when I was a kid, I really went from having no investment in competitive games at all to having heavy investment in these games and spending hours upon hours practicing and competing with friends and really working on improving my game sense and accuracy, etc., etc. But unknowingly at the time, because I was investing myself in the game, I started to realize that I was putting some of my identity as a person into my ability to play this game well. As I started to get good and players started to respect me as I used to respect other players, part of my ego attached itself to how well I was doing in the game. As time progressed, I unknowingly kind of invested all of myself into this game to where a lot of my mental health was reliant on how well I was doing competitively in these games. And for a really long time past that point, I could tell that these games were impacting the way that I felt. And some days would completely shift my moods and make it to where I felt really depressed or really anxious or uptight. I could feel the adrenaline rush every time I got into a competitive battle. I could feel all of those emotions. And even though I, generally speaking, had a pretty decent emotional IQ, I was really blind in this area. And it was something that really took my mental health to a place that was really not positive. So that's kind of my story. If you've been with me for any time, you know that I took a big break from gaming for a long time and kind of got out of that environment to kind of reset myself. But still to this day, it's really difficult for me sometimes to work with this environment and to kind of separate myself from video gaming and what goes on in that culture. It's still, to this day, one of the biggest things that I need to work on and one of my greatest weaknesses when it comes to my emotional health. So I wanted to go through some of the reasons why this is the case and kind of talk through some of the things that really are prevalent in the gaming community that can impact emotional health. These things are the things that impacted me and, generally speaking, impact a lot of the people that I play with and their mental health and well-being as well. And one of the main things that happens in the gaming community that means the most for somebody's mental health is mental warfare. Another term for it is trash talk. This is going to be hard for me to say because of how many S's are in the word, but there's a statistical link between a person's mental health or mental state and their competitive ability. Or maybe to reword it, there's a link between the way that a person feels and how well they do their job. And a lot of times in competitive gaming, this is something that's exploited by enemy players. Even if somebody's playing a game and their opponent is much better than them objectively, but they're able to impact that person's emotional state or that emotional well-being, maybe their confidence in their own playing ability, and make them doubt their skill skill at the game, there's a chance that that player will actually win over their opponent because, again, that connection between their mental well-being and their emotions and how well they perform in game. Also, if a player can evoke adrenaline in the other player, maybe surprise them, something like that, there's also a chance that their movements will be more erratic, or they'll have trouble tracking in accuracy as much, maybe forget some of the things that they're trained in, and these things will all impact their ability in game. And because this is one of the most well-known tactics, it almost comes naturally to most people, this is one of the things that's used the most in the gaming environment. Trash talk and similar things are super prevalent throughout game chat and live chat, or even if there's really strong character control and somebody can kind of control their character in a way to show other people that they're putting them down, it can impact that player and the people in that game. A common example of non-verbal trash talk or toxicity would be teabagging in Halo and other games. Even if a person's not intentionally putting their self-worth into a game, but accidentally does, and maybe invests himself a little deeper than they thought, maybe just to try to get better at the game so they can play with their friends and have more fun, there's a chance that the trash talk and the toxicity of the environment that they're in can really genuinely impact their emotions, their well-being, how they feel on a day-to-day basis, and potentially create a downward spiral in people's lives that can really impact their futures, as it did mine. And I think this could really be a problem because one of the biggest prevailing issues right now are depression and anxiety in teens, in young adults, and a lack of emotional IQ in how to interact socially and how to work with people. A lot of this comes out of how people were raised, especially males in society, especially here in America. They're just not really taught how to work socially or to understand people or to really work with their own emotions and really understand what's going on inside their heads and process the feelings that they're having. And I believe that this is compounded by video gaming and this nature of toxic competitive interaction. And the two solutions for people to kind of exist in this environment are not positive either. On the one hand, you have people that just continually harbor those emotions up and it comes out in angry bursts, or you have people that kind of toughen up their emotions and kind of try to completely devoid themselves of those kinds of feelings so they can exist in the environment and not be impacted by the kind of trash talk that goes on. Both of these things really aren't positive because on the one hand, you have people that are acting out in ways, usually physically or mentally, or having outbursts that really aren't positive for their own mental health, but could also be really dangerous for the people that they're with. And there's a lot of stories of people punching their monitors or punching things in the rooms, and even though that's an inanimate way to express anger, generally speaking, studies prove that that's not the most healthy way to deal with a person's emotions, and I'll list some of those here as well. On the other side, you have people toughening themselves up and kind of trying to close themselves off from emotions, which could generally impact the way that they interact with other people in society. If a person tries to close themselves off and kind of wall away emotion from impacting them, there's a chance that that's going to impact how they view other people and desensitize them to the emotions other people are feeling. And that generally can cause a lot of issues when it comes to understanding how to interact socially, when a person's actually saying no and meaning no, or any of the other kinds of things. This is a little bit more speculation than it is pure fact. If I have a study, I will link it here, but generally speaking, at least in the way that it's impacted me, I could definitely see this becoming a problem or being part of the problem of just a lack of emotional IQ in young adults, generally speaking, during their growth periods as they're children, all the way up into their 30s. So like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't want it to just be negative. I don't want to just be talking about these things and say that this is an issue and then leave it at that. Some of the things that I've done to really help me kind of work in this environment and not be super impacted by all of the negativity and the toxicity that happens is to limit my own exposure to video games. I pretty much only play video games for about 2 hours a day right now, and I limit my interaction competitively to an even smaller amount of that time. A lot of the times I'm playing against just AI or trying to play some competitive games that are a little bit more casual to where, you know, I'm not really as worried about the outcome of it, that I can still have fun if I lose. And even when I'm competing competitively, I do my best to remind myself that my self-worth and identity is not in this game, that I am my own person outside of this game. My self-worth doesn't require me winning in that game or being better than anybody else that plays it. Another good tactic is to have a lot of energy when going into playing competitive video games. I usually stream in the mornings from about 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock a.m. And while that's totally an ungodly hour and it's super early, it's something that helps me have a lot of emotional energy and a lot of patience when I'm playing these games, and allows me to kind of handle the punches as they're thrown at me a lot better than when it's 10 p.m. or 12 a.m. and I'm already really tired myself. Also brings my emotions and my kind of tolerance to negativity and toxicity a lot down as well. A way to visualize it is you have your physical, mental, and emotional kind of energy and health. And when one of those drops, it's also going to pull the rest of those down. So if you're having a really bad physical day, there's a chance that your emotions and your energy are going to be impacted as well. If you're mentally stressed or working really hard on something at work, there's a chance that you're going to find yourself physically tired because of that. And the same thing with emotional stuff. If you're struggling with depression or something like that, there's a chance that your physical health and your mental health, or your mental capacity to work on problems and solve things, is going to drop along with it. And so to be able to handle a lot of stress in one area, those other two areas need to be really strong. So that way, when one dips, you kind of have some others to kind of hold it up. And then know you're going to need some time for recuperation. That if you're really experiencing a lot of emotional stress, you're going to need something that's going to kind of bring those levels back up, kind of bring you back to a level of homeostasis, as it's called. So those are two small tips that help me out a lot. And you know, as things go on, I may try to put more of these videos out. I really tried to show some of my sources, some of my proof for this. And generally speaking, I think a lot of people's emotional IQs are going up. That a lot of people are kind of experiencing kind of emotional depth and working on those kinds of things at a younger age now. And I think generally speaking, that's a really positive thing. But there's also a lot of depression and anxiety that a lot of people deal with. Even if somebody's strong emotionally or is really in touch with who they are and where their confidence lies, being involved in a community that is completely centered around toxicity or mental warfare or stuff like that, or a community that kind of makes use of those things, could really impact people like it did me and not be a super positive thing for them. And so maybe with this video, it'll bring a little bit of awareness to that subject and maybe help you guys out a little bit in understanding it. That's pretty much all I've got for today. I love you guys. You're awesome. You're amazing. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day. And if you're not, I really do hope it gets a lot better for you. Until next time, see you around.